Well, today's the penultimate day of the conference here in Brighton. The weather's cheered up a tiny bit, a bit of sunshine in the distance. Things do feel quite a little bit flat though, a little bit like you're waiting for the end of term bell. Not many big stories coming out of the conference this morning in this morning's papers and on the broadcast. One is the suggestion that they could introduce a couple of new extra tax bans on council tax for much bigger homes. And then this has brought back the subject on the floor of the House at least twice, on the floor of the conference centre at least twice today, of the mansion tax. Danny Alexander, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, giving it a very, very fulsome backing today. And Matthew Oakeshott, who's been one of the main campaigners for it, Lord Oakeshott, telling journalists that he's pretty confident that we will see this pretty soon. The other big story in The Guardian was an ICM poll suggesting that the Lib Dems under Nick Clegg were polling about 14% nationally, but with Vince Cable as leader they would poll 19%. That's a 5-point bounce for the Business Secretary as leader of the Lib Dems. Couple of interesting things about this. One is that 15% nationally is quite an important totemic level for the party. It's a level at which people don't wake up in a sweat in the night. So people with longer memories will know that that's a level at this time in the Parliament at which they can feel that they're not doing too badly, that they're not facing sort of electoral wipeout, as some people have been predicting last week. The other question is how long they would last with that big bounce with Vince Cable as leader. And we have here Prateek Buch from the Social Liberal Forum to ask this and some other questions too. Prateek, how long do you think they would survive at a much higher level with Vince Cable? How long would that bounce effect last?
Well, it's a bit of a theoretical question because Nick's going to remain our leader until he remains our leader. These polls are difficult to handle, really. What's interesting is the point you made about the fact we're at 15 at the moment anyway. And if there was to be anything to read into the bounce with Vince, it's the fact that he's quite clearly our most effective cabinet minister in government. What's really important that Vince carries on doing exactly what it is that he's doing, which is working really hard to get the economy back on track.
The other much bigger announcement, which is more likely to gain the headlines, is his reiteration of the fact that there will have to be more cuts to social security, to the welfare budgets in the future. Prateek, how well is this going to go down with conference, and how well has he made the case for these cuts?
Well, I think in making the case for the cuts, it's simply focusing on the need to lessen the gap between the government's income and its expenditure. And there's obviously two ways to look at that. You can make further cuts, and in doing so you can look at simply what are the biggest areas that we're spending on at the moment, and welfare stands out. And you can decide that then that's what we should be focusing on for that reason. You could turn things around and say, well, number one, we can collect more tax. And I think Danny's actually, the strength in his speech was the ideas that you just talked about collecting more tax from companies and from individuals who can afford to pay. The other side of it, of course, is that there was a little bit less in his speech, or virtually nothing at all, about how growth in the economy is actually related to how much the government earns in tax receipts. And I think those are issues that really need to be tackled before we think about further cuts to welfare, which has already suffered really quite significant cuts. I think I've been in meetings virtually all day actually today talking about what happens if and when the Conservatives bring forward proposals for more cuts to the welfare budget. You ask how well it would go down in the party. It was a very simple question, a very simple answer. Danny himself said we don't want to balance the books on the backs of the poor. If you cut welfare yet further without tackling the biggest part of the welfare budget, which is actually going towards pensions, then you're going to really struggle to keep to that one promise that you just made, to not balance the books on the backs of the poor.